Some secrets are better left hidden deep beneath the earth. Unfortunately for us, archaeologists gotta dig and happen to dig up some truly terrifying business. Number 5. The Knife Blade Man. Discovered in 2018 in northern Italy, a group of archaeologists were digging up a massive gravesite of the Lombardo, an ancient Germanic people. Found in a necropolis, which is a very fancy word for a large, elaborate tomb, and maybe one of the best words in the English language, the team found hundreds of skeletons that were at the site, including horses and greyhounds, and for the most part, they're not particularly notable. You've seen one old bag of bones, you've seen them all, except for one skeleton that in the place of a forearm was an impressive blade. Now this raises countless fascinating questions. Who was this guy? Was this the first Assassin's Creed protagonist? Some legendary madman of a warrior who lost an arm and thought, I don't know, put a blade on there, I can still fight? Well, the Lombardo people placed a great emphasis on war and combat in their culture, so it is possible. The researchers noted that there was a clear dated buckle around his arm, and pressure on the bones of his arm showed that it was an intentional prosthetic, right down to the wear and tear on his teeth, suggesting he tightened the straps for his hidden blade with his teeth. Most of the other skeletons found in the necropolis all had blades buried with them at their sides, perhaps ritually out of honor, but this unique specimen had it grafted onto his arm like he's history's first cyborg or Baraka from Mortal Kombat. To be able to not only survive an amputation, pre-antibiotics and modern medicine is already impressive. And hey, if you're always looking to learn something from knife arm skeletons, then toss a subscribe our way. Top 5 Scaries always got a couple scary videos for you every day. Let's creep on creeping on. Number 4. The Hanging Coffins. We're going up to China for our next one, specifically Hubei, China. There's a cave there that the locals call the Cave of the Fairies, and you've probably already realized that there's gonna be a dark secret involved with the Cave of Fairies. We never talk about anything nice here. It was said that the mythical creatures were supposed to live in the cave, but those who explored it inside found that there wasn't much of anything living at all, instead finding something deeply disturbing. Rows and rows of coffins, some hanging from ropes, some jammed, wedged between the rocks of the cave. The coffins themselves were massive, weighing around 200 pounds each, and some destroyed and ravaged. Dating the coffins puts them at around 1200 years old, and are thought to have been put up by the ancient Bo people, an extinct culture hailing from China, famous for this unique practice of hanging coffins from caves. It's thought that this served 2 purposes. 1, as a ritualistic offering meant to bless the dead, and 2, from a practical, pragmatic sense, it would prevent any would-be carrion eaters from picking through to get a meal. Fascinatingly, it can be seen that all of the coffins were carved from a single tree, one big log. One wonders if that was part of the ritual element of it. Now the coffins being smashed is interesting, because the discoverers of the coffins theorized that the damage was actually pretty recent, dating it to the 1960s. And their prevailing theory was that someone wandered into this cave in a place of desperation and smashed the coffins to garner some firewood in the hopes that they could survive the night and not pass among the hanging dead. Let's just hope they didn't release any ancient curses at the same time.
Coming in next at number 3, the Altamura Man. Now, dying alone is a terrifying enough notion, but how about dying alone at the bottom of a 26-foot deep well in the far recesses of a further 200-foot long tunnel system, only to be encrusted into a wall of pure limestone for over 150,000 years? Well, whilst you'd be perfectly preserved and your skeleton frozen in time for modern scientists to find you, that's also exactly what happened to one of our unfortunate Neanderthal ancestors, the Altamura Man. And his skeleton was so well preserved that researchers could even recreate perfectly how he would have looked way back when. And he looked like this. What a great looking fella. Hasn't he got the kindest eyes you've ever seen? Well, unfortunately, way back in 1993, when he was discovered by spelunkers in a karstic cave near the Italian town of Altamura, he was a little bit less kindly looking and instead resembled something straight out of a nightmare, petrified by stalagmites and sunken into the cave wall itself through thousands upon thousands of years of limestone droplets. I'm not sure what's more terrifying, the ultimate fate of the Altamura Man or the fact that he was discovered when he was lost to the mysteries of the earth for over 150,000 years by a bunch of spelunkers. Next up at number 2, Capacocha. Very little is known about the ancient ritualistic practice of Capacocha, and the earliest known written accounts were from the Spanish conquistadors in their observations of ancient Inca practices, documenting numerous accounts of child sacrifices where children would be led to caves high up in the mountainous peaks of the Andes region to give their lives and be reborn as gods and goddesses in their culture. It sounds like incredibly heavy stuff, and it is, but the practice of Capacocha was incredibly important to the Inca civilization, and it was considered to be the highest honor for members of their society. And although that's terrifying enough in itself, the method in which they were sacrificed is even more terrifying. Essentially, they were paraded around the kingdom with huge feasts held in their honor, where the procession led by the emperor would make its way toward the frozen peaks of the mountain over month-long ritualistic celebrations. There, the sacrifice was taken to a tomb and offered up to the gods, where the tomb was sealed over days with mounds and mounds of dirt. So then, when a group of archaeologists were surveying the region in 1999 at a site found near a volcano in Argentina, they unwittingly unearthed one of these tombs of legend, only to find a scene literally frozen in time. 3 ancient Inca children perfectly preserved in ceremonious fashion down to the ice-cold climate of the region. Whew, yeah. Exactly. That's ancient history for you guys. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, Sacred Ridge. Now, if you know anything about Sacred Ridge, an ancient site in Durango, Colorado, you'll know that it's synonymous with one of the most grisly and violent atrocities in ancient American history. What was once thought to be evidence of a peaceful habitat of the early Pueblo culture, after closer excavation, it was revealed that Sacred Ridge played witness to a bloody and brutal massacre, given the fact that 2 of the excavated pit houses contain nearly 15,000 human body fragments belonging to around 35 separate people, thought to be about half of the village's population. After analysis of the bone fragments, evidence of extreme torture and mutilation quickly became apparent, and it is thought that the massacre was part of a wider uprising in the ridge's basin area sometime around the year 810. Now, the reason for this massacre will never be truly known, but the grisly reality of this discovery can only lead historians to study the archaeological evidence, which all points toward methods of extreme torture. After studying the bone fragments of the 33 victims' feet, researchers concluded that these methods of torture all bore the hallmarks of hobbling. Yes, hobbling, as in the excruciating action carried out by Annie Wilkes in Stephen King's Misery. It was thought that hobbling was used as a violent warning sign to other victims, but the fact that pretty much all of the bone fragments contain the same trauma marks only leads to more questions. Now, there are a multitude of theories surrounding the fate of the victims of Sacred Ridge, but it seems that the answer, whatever it may be, will be forever lost to the mysteries of time.
Number 3. The Black Sarcophagus. Now, you might have heard of this one before. If you were on Twitter much a couple years ago, maybe you remember vaguely hearing about sarcophagus juice. Maybe those words are ringing a strange bell. There was a pretty good petition going around to let people drink the sarcophagus juice. But let's back up a bit. What is sarcophagus juice, and where did it come from, and why do we want to drink it? Well, I've got the answers. Somewhat. I've got some answers. In 2018, a team of archaeologists digging in Alexandria, Egypt, discovered a massive granite black sarcophagus, which immediately set off everybody's warning signs that you should not touch that. People wondered what the 30-ton stone slab could be containing, with some even suggesting it could have been the mighty body of Alexander the Great. People warned the archaeologists that there, could be some ancient evil, like when King Tut's tomb was raided and a very strange curse befell the explorers and excavators. Well, what they found wasn't a hidden curse, but honestly something stranger. 3 skeletons inside the coffin, with a skull shattered by an arrow and a whole lot of mysterious black goop, or sarcophagus juice. So again, looping right back around it. What is the sarcophagus juice, and does it taste good? Well, scientists analyzed the sludge and discovered that it was made from a combination of animal fats, tree resin, beeswax, and crude oil. The sludge has been recovered out of multiple coffins and sarcophagi, so it's not exclusive to this dreaded one. But that doesn't explain why this nasty stuff is there. Well, there's some theories about this, no concrete answers, but I'll do my best. It's said that when someone died, they become a form of the god Osiris, who is associated with death and rebirth. Osiris was called the Black One, and is depicted with very dark black skin in the guise of a mummified body. As well, black is also a color associated with the deposits on the bank of the River Nile after a flood season. Fresh and fertile soil was seen as inherently regenerative. So it's theorized that with the linking concepts of Osiris and the regeneration of the soil, soaking and filling the coffins with this black sludge was a very confusing part of the mummification process. Number 2. Headless Vikings. In 2008, a group of archaeologists were doing some fairly routine work in Dorset, a seaside town in England, in a rather dull job to improve local roads around the area. As could be expected, not too much of note was discovered, except for the mass grave of 54 headless Viking mercenaries. And not just were their skulls missing, but the rib cages, arms, and leg bones were all arranged neatly, surrounded by discarded teeth. No clothes or weaponry was discovered. So what happened? Because nothing my imagination is coming up with is conjuring anything good. Well, the bones revealed some fascinating finds, and I'll warn you now, by Odin's beard, they're all terrifying options. The teeth surrounding the grave were all filed down, but done neatly as if a craftsman had done it. Obviously, pre-Novocaine dental surgery wouldn't go down easy, so the process must have been excruciating, suggesting perhaps these men had it done to them out of some sort of punishment, or they did it to themselves to frighten their opponents and show them just how strong they were. Neither one of those options is particularly pleasant to consider. But now let's get spine chillin' with it. The archaeologists' prevailing theory about what happened to this big Nordic pile of bones is that looking at the wound patterns on the ribs and the torso bones were smart, surgical, precise blows, not matching with a rabid hack job you'd expect from a brawl. The archaeologists suggested that the Vikings weren't slain in battle, but rather offered up perhaps to some sort of strange, sadistic ritual, or perhaps a mass execution. It would explain why the men had no gear with them as well. The large number of bodies and intense cruelty of it suggests that there wasn't any trained executioners, leading to the prevailing theory that it's a dark, dark ritual. Number 1. Bog people. Name one good thing that's ever been found in a bog. Need some help? There's never been one. For peat farmers in northern Europe, it's a thankless life, working in wet, muddy bogs and occasionally finding leathery preserved bog mummies. Due to the low temperatures, lack of oxygen, and high acidity of bogs, bodies found there are preserved disturbingly well. Well, preserved is a bit of a misnomer. They're twisted and rived, but they're intact sort of. It's hard to think of these as preserved well because they look like the scariest things you've ever seen, but the process is weirdly fascinating if you're interested in looking up something disgusting. This happens all over northwestern Europe, with no one specific case to point to. It happens all over Ireland, Germany, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and so on. The bodies range from anywhere as old as 8,000 years old, preserved, to the most recent appearing to have been from the early turn of our century. Now, no one really has any idea how many of these bog bodies could be out there, and no one really knows how the unfortunate bog victims ended up in their final muddy resting spot. Some of them could possibly have just been unlucky souls who found themselves lost and fell in. But another prevailing theory is that Roman Iron Age people in northern Europe sacrificed people to the bogs, which sounds too dark to be real, but apparently is. They would also offer people as sacrifice or as punishment for their perceived social imperfections, which may I just say I am very glad this practice isn't commonplace, because I would be cast into the bogs faster than you could say peat deposit.
Kicking off at number 5, The Pit of Arms, which is a pretty intriguing title, isn't it? If not probably the best opening track to a death metal album. But as it turns out, this particular Pit of Arms is much more terrifying than the likes of Cradle of Filth or Job for a Cowboy, because it's exactly what it says on the tin, or the pit to be specific. Throughout the archaeological dig sites of ancient Europe, researchers have found numerous circular pits constructed in the same strange fashion, dotted across the continent, that all seem to date back to around, roughly speaking, 4000 BC. Most of them have left researchers pretty perplexed, but this one in particular, a pit found near the village of Bergheim in France that was filled to the brim with 6 adult arms, 1 child's arm, and random scattered hand bones. Also, the team of researchers on this mystery obviously had a sense of humour, as they named their research paper A Farewell to Arms. So what were they doing there? Well, strangely enough, above the layer of arms and hand bones were the skeletons of the limbless victims, which seems to suggest these Neolithic victims were tortured and dismembered before they were later buried on top. It's left researchers pretty perplexed, to say the least, but it seems to indicate evidence of organised warfare in the Neolithic period of ancient Europe, although no other evidence of conflict has been found to support this theory. And people have been digging in Europe for a long time. They could have been captured enemy warriors, or they could have been innocent victims of a massacre. The only thing we can know for certain is their arms were thrown in a pit, and then they shortly followed. That's grim. Coming in at number 4, Hearts of Lead. And yeah, pretty death metal too, right? I could release an album at this rate. In actual fact though, this entry on our list is possibly the most modern that we've ever covered, and yet it still dates back to over 400 years ago. Now, have you ever loved someone so much that you want to be buried with their heart in a lead urn for 400 years? And also, I'm quite concerned as to whether these hearts were given posthumously. I really hope they were. Well, as it seems, archaeologists from France's National Institute were extensively excavating graves for years at an ancient cemetery in northwestern France at the convent of the Jacobins in Rouen, in one of the oldest preserved cemeteries in Europe. There, underneath the basement of the convent, they unearthed hundreds of burials, some of which dated back to the late 16th century, and 5 of which, strangely enough, were buried with the same familiar set of artifacts, a heart-shaped urn made of lead. Ah, That's cute, right? Well, after taking a closer look at these warm fuzzy relics, it was discovered that they each had a human heart sealed within them. After more digging, it became apparent that it was all the rage for wealthy upper class families to be buried with the literal hearts of their spouses and loved ones, and they were also so well preserved that scientists could scan the organs through MRI imaging to figure out what they died from. Nothing says I love you quite like, here's my heart in an urn, right?
Number 5. Spiral graves. Okay, remember in Game of Thrones when all those body parts were left in like a crazy weird spiral formation? The Night King or the whatever king was doing it? I don't know. Imagine if you were walking and all of a sudden you see that. I would probably throw up on the spot. Well, that's pretty close to what was found beneath Mexico City in 2006. Archaeologists discovered a 2,400-year-old burial site containing 10 bodies, placed in a very peculiar way. The bodies were found roughly 4 feet beneath a building at the Pontifical University of Mexico. And here's the weird part. The bodies were found in a spiral formation around a centric point, as if they were kind of moving around something. Which is even weirder, the arm bones were interlocked, so it's like, were they placed there on purpose? What's going on here? To quote Jimena Rivera, director of the Project of Excavation and Archaeological Salvage, nailed that one I think, there was one individual over the other. So for example, the head of one individual was like in the chest of another, and the hand of one dude was like under the back of another guy. What a weird party. And the craziest part, the body of a baby was found on top of another body. This whole thing is just disgusting. What kind of ritual was this? There's been no previous record of a burial done that way, so why now? It's still unclear why this burial site even exists, or why the bodies were placed in such odd ways. Who knows, maybe it was a surprise birthday party and the guy didn't show up, so they just stayed there for 2,000 years. That, my friend, is commitment. Number 4, the London Hammer. Found in 1936 in London, Texas, not London, England, or London, Ontario. We don't talk about that third one. A man named Max Hahn and his wife spotted a strange rock that seemed to have a wooden handle sticking out of it. Now, of course, they were curious, so they went over and took a closer look. They realized that the wooden handle was moving a bit, but the rock was wrapped around it. Odd. So once the rock was then cracked open, it was revealed that there was a hammer inside of the rock. Thor, is this yours? The rock itself dates to be back from the Ordovician period, which was about 400 million years ago, give or take. Which is pretty wild considering that human beings have only really been around for about 200,000 years. So what's the deal? Is this hammer from the future, Asgard? We need answers now. The hammer itself is in amazing condition for being as old as it is. Strangely enough, parts of the handle have actually turned into coal, yet the 96% iron hammerhead has yet to rust. I've gone through like 3 bikes in my adult life. The rust got 2 of them real good, real good. This hammer must have been covered in CLR. Or a mystery is afoot, I don't know. The hammer is 6 inches long and 1 inch thick, and it doesn't look like it was made by accident. The hammer is actually very similar to late 1800 man-made tools, so the discovery has us stumped. How can something be made that long ago by humans? Many believe this is the first piece of evidence that time travel exists. Also, how is it still intact? I feel like the wood should have broke off ages ago. If you want a glimpse of the mystery hammer yourself, you can find it on display right now in the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. And then you can decide for yourself. Number 3, Antikythera mechanism. After being submerged for over 2,000 years, we believe we found the oldest known analog computer to date. Discovered in 1902 by Greek politician Spyridon Stays, this clock-sized device was said to be made sometime between 70 and 200 BCE. That's an old clock. More like a great-grandfather clock, am I right? So does this thing track your steps? Can it change songs? No and no. It was actually meant for much more. This extremely complex piece of history was meant to calculate the positions of astronomical objects. Containing over 30 spinning gears and wheels, and colored rocks even, to mark which planet was which, the Antikythera mechanism also tracked the moon, the sun, all the eclipses, and most importantly, what day the Olympics are. Talk about a cool reminder. I think it was yesterday. Sorry, I know, it was, I messed up, I f***ed up, sorry guys. We're not quite sure how humans figured this out that long ago, but each additional piece we discover gets us closer to our very old truth. The closest discovery we have to this device are medieval cathedral clocks, but those were built about a millennium later, so where did this come from? Aliens? Autobots? You be the judge.
Number 3 on this list is the vampire burials. We have talked about vampires a lot on this channel before. Whether they're real or not is still up for debate, but these archaeologists have found some evidence to suggest that some people thought that they really were. Live Science says the real story behind Eastern European vampires is quite possibly creepier than the fictionalized tales of Dracula. Between the 16 and 1700s in Poland, some people were buried with sickles over their necks or rocks wedged under their chins. These precautions precautions were taken to prevent the dead from rising again as vampires who locals believed would return to suck the blood of friends and family. In 2014, researchers found that the vampire burials at Dwarka Cemetery in Poland were the bodies of locals who had not died of trauma. They were likely victims of an epidemic that would have felled them rapidly, the researchers told Live Science. So maybe vampires, maybe not. Either way, it's pretty scary. If they weren't vampires, then they would have just been regular people who got sick, were probably killed, and then had to get a giant rock shoved in their mouths when they're put in the ground. Creepy. But then again, if they are real vampires, then you just found some literal dead vampires, and that's not good for anyone involved. No matter how you slice this one, it's just kinda all bad. Kinda hoping that they aren't real vampires though, because if they are, who knows if they're dead for good. We don't really need some undead vampires coming back to life and sucking all of our blood. Solid no thanks for me on that one. Number 2 on this list is cannibalism. Alright, so you're probably wondering, how did they discover cannibalism? Well, they discovered the evidence of cannibalism, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. Live Science says when Sir John Franklin and his crew headed off for the Arctic expedition in 1845, they hoped to navigate the Northwest Passage. They almost certainly did not expect that they'd be resorting to cannibalism within a few short years. The Franklin expedition's 2 ships, the HMS Terror and the HMS Erebus, became trapped in ice which failed to melt summer after summer. By April 1848, 24 men had died, and the remaining crew set off in an attempt to trek to the nearest trading post. None were ever heard from again. Over time, the bones of some of the crew members were found. In 2015, researchers reported that the bones had been hacked and boiled, and many were even cracked to get at the marrow inside. The discovery speaks to the very desperate situation in which those men found themselves. You have to imagine yourself in that situation, and would you do the same? And that's it, guys. What would you do? It's the 1840s, you're freezing to death, you're starving. Do you eat your fellow comrade? It's obviously a pretty brutal question that I think nobody wants to be forced to answer. The archaeologists saw the remnants of this problem head on, and I imagine it scarred a lot of them for life. And finally, number 1 on this list is Yan Shi. This is a tragic story of China's only female emperor, which was discovered by some archaeologists when they uncovered her tomb. Live Science says you worked for years supporting the first female emperor to China and smoothing her rise to power. You break your own arm instead of fighting against her for a rebel army. You help her mollify civil disorder, and then your little brother goes rogue and gets you all executed. That's the sad story of Yan Shi, one of the favorite officials of Wu Zetian, the founder of China's Zhou dynasty. Archaeologists uncovered Yan Shi's 1300-year-old tomb and discovered the tale on a stone inscribed epitaph. Yan Shi's little brother, Yan Shi, turned against Wu Zetian around 699. As a collective punishment, the entire family was executed and, according to the carvings, carelessly buried. Wow, we got an entire Game of Thrones season out of this terrifying discovery. Apparently, the execution really wasn't all that nice either, folks. This discovery is truly a window into what life would have been like back in that time. It really was the Wild West back then, and pretty much anything went. Pretty scary to picture how all of this went down, though. Who knows, maybe HBO will see this story's potential and put it on the screen for all of us. Number 5 on this list is missing nuclear weapons. Sometimes referred to as Operation Broken Arrow, this is where several nukes are just missing. One would think that nuclear weapons are the type of thing that would be hard to lose, but that's exactly what happened in the 50s. It's currently believed that the American government is missing 6 separate weapons. This is due to various accidents that have occurred during the transport of said nuclear weapons. A lot of these accidents took place when planes have had to make crash landings or had accidents while they were in midair. From these various accidents, there are actually still weapons that are unaccounted for and missing in the world. This is honestly truly pure insanity. The thought that I could be walking down the street one day, take a wrong step, and trigger an atomic bomb that no one has found is just pure craziness. And honestly, maybe that example is a bit of a stretch, but there are believed to be some bombs at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. What if the wrong people discovered these weapons and used them for their own evil intentions? What if some boat stumbles upon them and triggers them, causing a catastrophic event in the ocean? Some of these bombs are also believed to be lost somewhere in Spain. Well, what if those accidentally went off? Is Spain gonna think that they're under attack and fire back at someone? Could an accidental explosion actually cause a chain reaction that fuels an entire war? 6 of the most destructive things humans have ever made are just out and about and ready to be found. If anyone but the government discovers these first, it could be really bad. Number 4 on this list is ghosts. This YouTube channel is called Top 5 Scary Videos. On Top 5 Scary Videos, I've done many a video referencing various scary things, and a lot of them have included or at least touched on ghosts. A ghost, defined by Oxford Dictionary, is an apparition of a dead person which is believed to appear or become manifest to the living, typically as a nebulous image. Now, in this definition, Oxford very carefully chooses the word believed when they're talking about a ghost's appearance and mannerisms. I believe that they specifically chose this word because no one really knows for sure exactly what a ghost is, how it presents itself, or what it looks like. This is because we don't even really know if ghosts are real. One of the most debated arguments throughout history has been in regards to ghosts being real or not. We have millions and millions of stories that revolve around ghosts, and yet we don't even know that they're 100% real. Well, what if we did discover this? Would it just be a cool discovery? Or would it actually mean something worse? If we discover that ghosts are real, then I don't think that the world will immediately end. Unless the discovery of said ghosts caused the ghosts to attack us, then we should be fine. But let's put it this way. If we discover that ghosts are real, we discover that when we die, we're gonna become a ghost and live on in that universe. And if that's the case, then why does this world even matter? If there's no fear of death or of wasting our time in this world, then we might all lose our minds. Would death still mean the same thing anymore? Would it even be considered bad anymore, thinking that we'll just live on in another life? If ghosts are discovered, then I think it could directly impact the value that we attribute to human life. Right now, human life is considered to be the most valuable thing, but maybe it wouldn't be if we knew that there was another world waiting for us. Potentially, this world of the living could devolve into some dystopia where no one ever fears the consequences of their actions, where war is rampant and death is high. Actually, ask yourself right now, if you knew that you had another life waiting to start, you knew this with 100% certainty, would you live your current life differently, and would it be for better or would it be for worse?
Number 2, the Black Knight satellite. First discovered in 1954 by Dr. Lincoln La Paz, the Black Knight satellite is the oldest recorded satellite in history. When news broke that La Paz had discovered the satellite, it was a pretty eye-opening headline, considering that there were no countries that have actually launched a satellite at that time yet. And it was photographs of the Black Knight that were released in 1998 that caught our attention. This photo. Now, before jumping to the conclusion that this is an alien space knight, the Pentagon initially thought that the Russians had just beaten them into space. Now, space journalist James Oberg says it's just a lost piece of heating equipment from when they were building the International Space Station. Oh yeah, you sure about that, James? Huh? What do you work for, NASA or something? He does? Huh. While that theory does make a lot of sense, there are still other factors that play into this conspiracy. Nikola Tesla previously discovered some strange signals that many believe was actually the same Black Knight satellite. While at his laboratory in Colorado Springs in 1899, he picked up radio signals that he believed came from, well, another planet. Who knows, maybe the Black Knight will just collide with Elon Musk's space car and then he'll just fire up the engine and head down to Earth. I feel like that's the only thing left for 2020 at this point. And lastly, number 1. Gobekli Tepe. When you think of old man-made landmarks, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? The pyramids maybe? Stonehenge perhaps? Discovered in 1994 in Sanliurfa, Turkey, Safakiyildiz came across a stone that had an unusual shape to it that was sticking out of the ground and decided to get a closer look. Who knows, maybe it's another one of those time-traveling hammers. Once realizing it was attached to a much larger rock, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt came in and dug up the grounds. What he found was much cooler than an oddly shaped rock. See, this rock was actually a T-shaped pillar and was one of a dozen found. And each pillar was around 20 tons, covered with carvings of animals like birds and insects. And the best part? The rock dates to be about 60,000 years older than Stonehenge. Excuse me? Around each of the massive pillars were large circles of stones, and each of these stone monuments would have taken years to be moved, first of all, and the carvings on top of that, This is just wild. So what is this? Why is this here? Well, Klaus Schmidt believed that it was for ancient funerals, and had hoped that during the exploration he would find bodies under rock circles or under the pillars. That's a wild thing to hope for. I've never been here at work and been like, I really hope I find some bodies hidden under some rocks. Fingers crossed. They didn't find anything though, and we have yet to find any signs of previous life on the site to this day, or plant life for that matter. Some researchers have even gone so far to say that it's the biblical Garden of Eden. So what do you think Gobekli Tepe is hiding?
Number 5 on this list is decapitated gladiators. Being an archaeologist must be very difficult because at one point finding the remains of a dead person could be a great historical find, and at the other point you just found the remains of a dead person. Live Science says a set of skeletons discovered in York, England belonged to tall men who died before the age of 45. What makes them gruesome is that all of them had also lost their heads. Their heads were buried with them, sometimes on their chests and sometimes between their legs or feet. Researchers aren't sure why most of the skeletons at the Driftfield Terrace were decapitated. They date to between the 2nd and 4th centuries AD, when the area was part of the Northern Roman Empire. Because most of the skeletons were particularly tall and showed signs of trauma, they may be the bones of gladiators. They might also have been military men. A genetic analysis of 7 of the decapitated skeletons found that 6 hailed from Britain, while 1 may have come from Lebanon or Syria. As if being a gladiator and having to fight to the death for people's entertainment wasn't bad enough, but these poor buggers got their heads chopped off in the process. Maybe they actually got their heads chopped off in the gladiator ring. That was something that happened every now and again. When one clear gladiator won and the other had lost, they would finish them off by chopping their heads off. What's interesting is that these remains were found in Britain. Britain in that area wasn't necessarily known for having gladiators. That doesn't mean that they didn't have their own version of them though. It's very possible that hundreds of years ago they did, and the tournaments didn't end up going in these guys' favor. Either way, a great and interesting find, but still super creepy. A discovery like this is the type that's usually accompanied by some type of ancient curse or something. Wouldn't be surprised if whoever dug these bones up is dealing with the ghost of a dead gladiator or something like that. Number 4 on this list is the Pit of Death. Anything called the Pit of Death does not sound like something I'd want to discover. Live Science says a property development project in France uncovered something truly shocking in 2012. A pit 6.5 feet deep and 5 feet in diameter, filled to the brim with bones. Even more sickening, the bones consisted of severed arms and fingers, as well as the skeletons of infants, children, and adults. Researchers found at least 7 upper arms, including 1 from a young teenager. On top of the amputated limbs, 7 bodies had been tossed into the pit, including that of a middle-aged man who'd had an arm chopped off and suffered a blow to the head. These bones dated back about 5,335 years. We just had a big stew of bones going on here that these archaeologists were unlucky enough to fish up. These bones would have been back in Neolithic times and were probably a byproduct of some type of warfare. The people who discovered them also theorized that this pit may have served as a justice system of some type. Like if you break the rules, then we throw you into this pit to die or something along those lines. Either way, discovering a big heap of dead bodies from thousands of years ago has got to be pretty terrifying. I don't agree with everything the legal system does now, but at least we don't need to worry about being thrown into a death pit somewhere.
Number 5. Tiny mummy alien. In 2003, researchers in Chile uncovered something bizarre that rocked the archaeological world. It was a mummified skeleton. That's pretty normal. Except this one didn't look even remotely like any other skeleton or mummy any archaeologist had ever seen before. This mummy was tiny, yet elongated, deformed in a way that almost made it look like the dried carcass of a fish more than anything that could have been human. The mummy was barely even 6 inches, and while it had some traits that made it look human, everything about it was wrapped in mystery. Making matters more puzzling was the sight of its uncovering inside an abandoned ghost town in Chile, untouched by humans for years, found wrapped in a white cloth and a pink ribbon. The entity was dubbed Ada, and was fascinating professionals and armchair alien enthusiasts who wondered if possibly the mummy could have been evidence of extraterrestrial life, making it the first alien mummy ever found. There was even a documentary featuring her body, suggesting her as an alien. Researchers wanted to DNA test Ada data to discover just what her origins could have been, terrestrial or not. I mean, you gotta know, right? Eventually the DNA analysis would reveal the truth. An extract from Ada's bone marrow was used to conduct a study and was determined to be a human female. Now at first scientists were unsure about this because 8% of the DNA didn't match with human DNA, although later they determined this was because of a degradation in the sample. A later test would come in at 98%. And they discovered that the remains had a rare bone aging disorder that made the bones seem significantly older than the person they had belonged to. Bonitis, I think they called it. They determined as well that Ada's body contained evidence of several gene mutations to an extreme degree. I think you could probably guess that by looking at it. One researcher said, to our knowledge, no one has ever explained all of these symptoms in a patient before, and the changes in DNA or mutations reflect this. So yeah, Ada might not have been an alien, but the information in her DNA was definitely alien and unusual to the staff, who do hope that they can use what they've learned to put forward to help future patients. And if you're looking for more weird things found in the ground, Top 5 Scary has all of that and then some. We've got just about everything freaky that could be found under the sun and above it. We got cryptids, conspiracies, true crime, aliens, fake crime, you name it, we got it. So click on through, hit the bell, subscribe, and don't miss a thing. But do it after this video, okay? We got way more weird archaeological sites coming up for you. Number 4, the mass execution. Now I imagine getting executed is probably pretty scary. It might be nice to have a bit of company to do it with. Maybe 80 of my closest friends would make it all go down just a little bit easier. A shocking discovery in 2016 found at least 80 partially complete skeletons unearthed at an ancient cemetery in the Phaleron Delta necropolis in Greece. Wow, that's a mouthful. Phaleron Delta necropolis. I'm pretty sure that's where like you'd fight a boss. Now, 80 skeletons all in one place. That's spooky. But it's the fact that all of these bodies were bound by iron shackles that is bone chilling. Some are laid neatly in a row, others have their jaws permanently hung open in terror, you know, fun stuff. Archaeologists have a pretty solid theory that this was an ancient Greek mass execution. Now the head of the excavation at the site said they'd all been executed in the same manner, but buried with respect. Well, that's good. As long as you get shoved in the dirt with respect alongside 79 other people, no harm done, truly. They were all tied at the hands with handcuffs, and most of them were very, very young and in a good state of health when executed. Now they suspect they were executed. That much is evident. But eluding researchers is why they were executed. The orderly way in which they were buried and dealt with suggests that while they may have been a nuisance to someone, they were important enough to be treated with just a little bit of respect. Isn't that nice? One theory, and before we get into this, let me just say I love this theory, is that these were supporters of an Olympic champion named Cylon who staged a coup against Athens with the help of his father-in-law, the tyrant of Megara. Nothing to do with the hottie from Hercules and Hades. Now, while Cylon managed to elude any harm that would come to him, it's possible that the Athenians who had pledged their support to him had to be punished, which is kind of all kinds of wild to me. Imagine if someone took your opinions about sports so seriously you ended up in a mass grave over it. We may never know why exactly these Athenians were shackled and buried, but we can speculate our best, and that's always a lot of fun, isn't it? We love wild speculation around Top 5 Scary. That's basically the brand. Number 3, the Dracula burials. Are you afraid of vampires? I'm gonna take a guess that the answer is most likely no. What with vampires mostly being fictional, they aren't a huge problem in today's society, and if they are out there, they've learned to mingle among us and they're not bothering anybody like Nicolas Cage and Keanu Reeves. Are they vampires? I don't know for sure, but why don't they age? Maybe it's because we've taken care of the vampire problem that they don't really keep coming up. Take a look at this. A recent discovery in Poland had researchers shocked when they discovered a grave site that seemed like it was host to a vampire mass burial. Bodies were found buried with sickles placed around their necks or rocks lodged down their jaws in order to keep them in place should a possible reanimation occur. That just seems like good sense, to be honest. Good built-in insurance so they're not going to come back. Now we think of Dracula as the king of the vampires, but the truth is stories of creatures of the night long predate the infamous Count, with stories appearing across Eastern Europe since the 11th century, and newspaper accounts of the revenant creatures since the 17th century. Researchers analyzed fragments from the Drowsko cemetery where this vampire masquerade was uncovered, learning some interesting tidbits. The vampires' DNA all suggested that they were locals and that their bodies had been laid to rest peacefully, otherwise that there was no signs of a violent struggle or an altercation of any kind. This led researchers to suspect that these people had fallen ill to cholera, and their symptoms had locals convinced that they might have been creatures of the night. Or they could possibly have been real vampires. I don't know if there's like a scientific test to determine vampirism. I don't know if you study that from the bones or anything. I think maybe you just hold a mirror up, and if you can't see them back, they're vampires, and I think that's the scientific process.
Number 3 on this list is aliens living among us. There's so many billions of stars out there in the universe that there must be all sorts of different forms of life. Will they be like you and me, made up of carbon and nitrogen? Maybe not. It's possible they're here right now and we simply can't see them. Now that's a quote from Helen Sharman, a British astronaut who's been to space before. Aliens, in my opinion, are a reality. There's no way that in an infinite universe that's ever expanding, we're the one planet that has the correct conditions to foster life. Now, even though aliens are probably somewhere out there in the universe, they may not be exactly like the movies portray them to be. They may not want to take us from our homes and harvest our brains or get full world domination. Maybe they aren't even made of carbon and nitrogen like Helen was suggesting. Maybe they're nice. Then again, maybe they aren't. Maybe, as some may suggest, they're inherently out to get humans. And maybe, as Helen suggested again, they're already here. If we were to discover that aliens were already living among us, how do you think that would go down? Mass hysteria? Chaos? Total anarchy? I think all of these are potentially possible. Also, if aliens are living among us and they haven't revealed themselves to us, then they probably don't actually want to be found. If, for instance, aliens are living among us and they're doing it for the purposes of, I don't know, studying us, let's just say. Well, if we found out that this other intelligent life was watching us, guaranteed that someone's government is going to try to round up these aliens and start studying them themselves. And then said alien and their potential alien buddies are probably not going to be too happy about it. Basically, if there are aliens living among us already, then I think it's actually in our best interest to not know. If we do find out about it, then it would probably unleash a bunch of backlash from the public and also aliens that we just might not be ready for. Number 2 on this list is the rapture. Quoting Wikipedia here, the rapture is an eschatological theological position held by some Christians, particularly within branches of American evangelicalism, consisting of an end-time event when all Christian believers who are alive, along with resurrected believers, would rise in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. This belief in the rapture has been one that's been around for quite some time. The return of Jesus is said to mark this day and redeem all those devout Christian believers. For those that are members of the church and have followed the word of God for their entire lives, the rapture, it'd be pretty freaking awesome. I mean, you get to fly up and live with the Lord in the sky in what one can only imagine is a heaven-like utopia. The rapture for everyone else and the actual planet Earth, yeah, it'd be pretty rough though. If we ever discovered the rapture to be true and something that was guaranteed to happen at one point, then many people would be in a lot of trouble. First, think about all of the millions of people that would vanish instantly from the face of the planet. If you're in a plane that's being piloted by a believer in Christ, then sadly that plane is now without a pilot. The initial chaos that this would cause would be absolutely catastrophic, and one can very easily see anarchy breaking out everywhere. What happens after that is wildly debated. Some believe that demons could come to Earth and take over, and that our new home will basically be the new hell. Obviously, this would freaking suck, and Earth as we know it would never be the same. But even if this didn't happen, and it was simply the action of losing a bunch of people at once, well, we may end up losing a billion people or so. It's very possible that the chaos that would cause is something that the world would never be able to come back from. The rapture may be elite for some, but could also end the world for others. Number 1 on this list is a rogue black hole. Black holes are already pretty scary without attaching the word rogue in front of them. They're clusters of space-time where the gravity is simply so strong that no light, no energy can escape from them, and where space-time is completely deformed. These vacuums of space are some of the most powerful things in the entire universe, and they've been known to eat up entire stars like they were animal crackers. A rogue black hole are black holes that are wandering around the universe, gobbling up matter like Pac-Man. These giants can also be invisible too, and it's estimated that there are tons of black holes that we just aren't even aware of because of this. As you'd probably imagine, discovering a rogue black hole near to Earth would be a massive problem. There would simply be nothing we could do to stop it from devouring our planet, our sun, everything we've ever known. The thing is, it doesn't even need to be that close to our planet to cause major issues though. If we discovered a black hole at the edge of our solar system, for instance, that could make a massive impact on us. Sucking up things on the outside of our solar system would change the gravitational forces that apply to planets around us, and then ultimately our planet as well. Any major gravitational shift on the solar system would dramatically affect our planet's trajectory and could cause irreversible damage. If Earth's orbit around the sun changed even slightly, this could totally alter our climate, or sea levels, or things that I'm not even aware of. The discovery of a rogue black hole coming into our solar system would probably be the end of our world as we know it. Let's just cross our fingers and hope that these vacuum cleaners of the universe have other galaxies on their mind.
Number 2. The Ghost of Reactor 4. In 1997, a physicist from the University of Buffalo visited the Chernobyl power plant and had a strange and frightening experience while in Reactor 4, the ground zero of the Chernobyl disaster. He arrived at 7:30 in the morning and went right into the Reactor 4 sarcophagus to begin his work. He was taking readings when he heard the faint sound of a voice. At first, he thought it was simply his imagination, but the voice continued to get louder and its words began to get clearer. The voice was frantically screaming and begging for help in putting out a fire. The physicist ran upstairs to inform the officials who had brought him there, but after explaining what he had heard to them, they looked at him with confusion and informed him that he was the first person to enter the location in 3 whole years. Aside from that, in order to enter the site, the alleged firefighter would have had to enter a password and scan his handprint to get through the doors. Otherwise, the alarm would have sounded. If all that is true, what was it that the physicist heard? Was it a vivid auditory hallucination, or the sounds of a specter from the past of a worker who saw the initial damage that would lead to the plant's meltdown, and did everything in their power to prevent it? Other paranormal activity has been reported from the site, with investigators from the sci-fi television program Destination Truth witnessing what appeared to be a human figure running through the reactor while they filmed with an infrared camera. Another strange occurrence actually took place in the days leading up to the disaster, with locals reporting strange sights. Workers at the plant reported seeing a black, gigantic, bird-like creature with glowing red eyes and a 20-foot wingspan. This creature was dubbed the Black Bird of Chernobyl, and those who saw it claimed to suffer terrible nightmares and menacing phone calls, which got progressively worse until the day of the accident. Similar creatures have been reported in the past, in the build-up to disasters all over the world, such as the Mothman creature, who apparently plagued the residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia in the lead-up to the Silver Bridge failure, which took 46 lives in 1967. Are these creatures harbingers of doom, who show up to feed off of the fear and anxiety of an area before a tragedy? Are they somehow responsible for the mistakes that led to these disasters? When will they be seen again? Only time will tell. Number 1. Mutated animals. In the aftermath of the Chernobyl disaster in 1986, there were a lot of questions being asked about the long-term effects of the radiation on the area. One of these was how it would affect the local wildlife. The disaster had caused hundreds of people to die or contract cancer, and others were being born with birth defects. So, scientists believed that wildlife in the area would die off and come to avoid the site. They were shocked to find that wildlife had actually come back much sooner than they had expected. Of course, a wild animal with a severe birth defect won't last very long in the wild without being killed. So, there have been relatively few wild mutated animals seen in Chernobyl. That doesn't mean that the wildlife is normal. Although most of the animals in the exclusion zone are free from glowing skin or extra body parts, they do carry a huge amount of radiation. In the early 90s, a wild boar was killed near Chernobyl and was found to have 2,000 times the amount of radiation that is considered safe for a human to consume. If physically deformed animals are what you are interested in, you would have better luck at nearby farms, as there have been significantly more examples of mutations seen in the domestic and farm animals left in the area. A decade after the accident, reports started coming in of animals being born with deformed faces, strange colors, multiple muzzles, and heads, as well as extra legs. Some of the more infamous examples include a lamb with 8 legs, a cat with 2 faces, a calf with legs growing out of its back, and another with 2 faces. Would you ever take on one of these deformed animals as a pet, or would the extra head prevent you from loving your cute and cuddly new friend?
Kicking off today's list, we have the sunken city of Dwarka. Until roughly 50 years ago, it was simply a legend, a story passed throughout the ages. The most famous legend about the lost city of Dwarka can be found in the ancient epic of Mahabharata. Dwarka, similar to Atlantis, is said to have sunk beneath the sea at some point in the distant past. According to the sacred scripture of Srimad Bhagavatam, the city of Dwarka was built in response to Jarasandha, the ruler of Magadha, who was constantly attacking Mathura. To prevent further attacks on his clan, Lord Krishna decided to establish a separate city on India's western coast. The city quickly rose to prominence and began the unstoppable pivot of Lord Krishna's mission, housing thousands of people in approximately 900 palaces that were crafted out of silver, gold, and precious stones, along with being heavily fortified and could only be reached by ship. At the time, the city of Dwarka quickly became a talking point around the world, inspiring awe and wonder. According to the Mahabharata's 23rd and 34th stanzas, the city was inundated and submerged by the Arabian Sea on the day that Krishna departed the earth to join the spiritual world after 125 years, and this is when the Kali Age began. The ocean's deity reclaimed the land, sinking the lost city of Dwarka, but sparing Lord Krishna's palace. It is also said that the lost city of Dwarka was attacked by Vimana, a flying machine. The description of the fight encourages ancient alien theories, as it appears that it was fought with sophisticated technology and powerful weapons from orbit. The spacecraft launched an attack on the city using energy weaponry, which resembled a lightning strike to onlookers, and it was so devastating that much of the city lay in ruins following the attack. A marine scientist discovered remnants of an underwater civilization near the coast of Dwarka, the city that's still on land that is, in the 1970s, and in 2002, scientists discovered an extremely advanced civilization from the past lying untouched beneath the ocean's surface. With the help of sound matrix and image technology, along with sub-bottom profiling, marine scientists were able to find the exact location of the city, including some stone structures. The lost city of Dwarka was officially found 120 feet underwater in the Gulf of Cambay, off the western coast of India. Thanks to carbon testing, it was established that the city is anywhere between 7,000 to 9,500 years old and stretches out 7 to 8 kilometers long and 3 to 4 kilometers in width. The most fascinating, or creepy thing about this underwater city, depending on your point of view, is that all human remains are still intact. Ergo, the main reason it made its way to today's list. Look, I'm not a scuba diver, but I can't think I'd be too fond of swimming around casually, admiring, architecture, and bam! Perfectly preserved dead bodies. During the 2002 excavation of Dwarka, many mud vessels, temple bells, ancient ritualistic vessels, and other artifacts were found, with the carbon dating indicating that they date back to roughly 7,200 BC, otherwise known as the prehistoric period. At the time of this research, scientists also found that a massive man-made wall that's almost 2,000 feet tall that has since been unearthed during periods of low tide and can't be easily seen. Granted, they're still waiting on absolute results from some strange structures made of iron they weren't able to identify. Maybe they're from the aliens? In fourth place, we have the Antarctica sea spiders. Okay, I'll admit it now, this one might be on the list purely because of how much it made me jump while researching. Seriously, look at the photos of these things. Yeah, this reaction is genuine. If I get nightmares tonight, I'm blaming y'all, okay? Before I start talking specifically about the big guys, time to dive into exactly what sea spiders are. Sea spiders are marine arthropods of the Pentapoda order and belong to the Pycnogonida class. They're cosmopolitan, and well, to some of us that sounds like a fancy drink. It just means they're found in oceans around the world. Lucky for me. There's over 1,300 known species, and they have legs ranging from 1 millimeter to over 70 centimeters in length, and that's over 2 feet in length. While most of them are towards the smaller end of this range, that won't qualify as terrifying now, would it? Although sea spiders are not true spiders, or even arachnids, their traditional classification as chelicerates would place them closer to true spiders than to other well-known arthropod groups, such as insects or crustaceans if correct. Sea spiders tend to either walk along the bottom of the ocean with their stilt-like legs, or just swim above it using an umbrella pulsing motion. They're mostly carnivorous predators or scavengers that feed on sponges, polychaetes, and bryozoans. Alright, time to talk specifically about the big guys. Those really long legs I mentioned a moment ago are everything to the Antarctic sea spider, since they're where its vital organs are kept, because it doesn't have much of a body. Its proboscis is also important because that's what it uses to suck the insides out of worms, jellyfish, fish, sponges, and other soft body prey. Sounds delicious, I guess? Right now, all I can picture is like that one scene from The Lion King where Timon and Pumbaa are sucking the insides out of squishy bugs, and I'm pretty sure Simba and I are having the exact same facial reaction. For my brain's sake, it's highly unlikely for most of us to ever come across one of the giant spiders, since they only live in the oceans around the polar regions. Gigantism has been observed in a number of other Arctic and Antarctic species, leading to biologists to consult a couple of theories that certain elements of the polar environment must be conducive to humongous body size. Over several hypotheses have been put forward, with some scientists claiming that large body size may have developed as an evolutionary trait to enable animals to withstand long periods of starvation during the winter, when resources tend to become, scarce in the polar regions. While others have suggested that some of these species may be somehow descended from creatures that invaded the Arctic and Antarctic from the deep sea, where high rates of gigantism have also been recorded. However, a recent study lends support to an entirely different theory, which revolves around the availability of oxygen in the polar oceans, since oxygen is more soluble in cold water than warm water. It has been suggested that this high availability of oxygen, coupled with the fact that low temperatures slow animals' metabolism down and reduce their need for oxygen, could facilitate their gigantism. And hey, they're not venomous, so overall, they're not as dangerous. But that's not going to stop my fears. In third place, we have the Mariana Trench. I'm just going to apologize in advance because I know I'll slip up at some point, if not every time, and say Mariana's Trench out of habit. I can't help it. They're my favorite band. Even writing up my points today, I kept adding in the extra S. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you're also a fan. The Mariana Trench is an oceanic trench located in the western Pacific Ocean, about 200 kilometers east of the Mariana Islands, and it is the deepest oceanic trench on Earth. It's crescent-shaped and measures about 2,550 kilometers in length and 69 kilometers in width. The maximum known depth is roughly over 36,000 feet, plus or minus another 80 feet, which is way too much math for my brain. At the southern end of a small slot-shaped valley and its floor known as the Challenger Deep. For reference, if Mount Everest was located at this point in the trench, its peak would still be underwater by more than 2 kilometers. And just remember, that's the world's tallest mountain we're talking about here, not some cute little hike. The Mariana Trench has been a major area of intrigue throughout history, with the trench first being explored during the Challenger expedition in 1875 using a weighted rope, which recorded a depth of 26,850 feet. In 1877, a map was published titled the Tiefenkarte de Grosses Oceans, or Depth Map of the Great Ocean, for those of us who don't feel like butchering a pronunciation today. Most recently, in 2011, it was announced at the American Geophysical Union Fall Meeting that a U.S. Navy hydrographic ship equipped with a multi-beam echo sounder had conducted a survey which mapped the entire trench to 330 feet resolution. As of 2022, 22 crewed descents and 7 uncrewed descents have been achieved. Some notable discoveries over the years include the 1960 expedition, which claimed to have observed large creatures living at the bottom, such as flatfish that were about 30 centimeters long, and shrimp. In July of 2011, a research expedition deployed untethered landers, or drop cams for those of us that prefer simple English, equipped with digital video cameras and lights to explore this deep sea region. Gigantic single-celled organisms with a size of more than 10 centimeters in diameter, belonging to the class of Monothelomia, were observed. Monothelomia are noteworthy for their size, their extreme abundance on the seafloor, and their role as hosts for a variety of organisms. In December of 2014, a new species of snailfish was discovered at a depth of approximately 26,722 feet, breaking the previous record for the deepest living fish seen on video. During that 2014 expedition, several new species were filmed, including amphipods known as supergiants, bringing us back to that deep water gigantism I talked about earlier. Now, before any of y'all go, but Alexa, why is this scary? Well, it's because it's a constant unknown. Being so large and so deep, something new and creepy is discovered every time people explore its depths. Who knows what's still hiding down there?
Number 2, the Skull Lake. In 2009, archaeologists were excavating the bottom of a prehistoric lakebed in Motala, Sweden, when they stumbled upon the foundations of a mysterious stone structure sealed at the bottom of the lake. Now, if a little siren is going off in the back of your head, you're not alone. I feel like you and I have the knowledge to not open a mysterious structure sealed at the bottom of a lake, but we can't all be as wise and as handsome as the top 5 scary audience. Well, the researchers did some digging and uncovered something very bizarre inside the mysterious stone structure, namely including animal bones, stone tools, and the 8,000-year-old skulls of 10 people, ranging in ages from very young to very old, and then found an 11th skull buried within the ancient mud at the bottom, and get this, like the world's worst Kinder Egg, they found fragments of another skull lodged inside the cranium of the 11th skull. It's a surprise for everybody. That would probably be already horrifying enough to earn itself a place on this list, but I buried the lead here and neglected to mention that several of the bodies had stakes driven through them and had shown signs that they were burnt. 2 of the skulls were found with stakes still stuck inside them, and 1 stake had been completely melded with the cranium. And I'm not even done yet. What's most concerning is that the archaeologists who discovered the terrible bone nesting doll don't even really know what they found. They're kind of shrugging just like you and I are now. One theory is that it was a ritual site, perhaps where some dark rituals would have taken place. The pointed end of the stake was probably stuck in the ground, and after the ritual was complete, the rest of the bones were just tossed under the shallow lake. Now that doesn't really explain the conditions of things unless it was a particularly violent ritual. Parts of a skull don't tend to end up in someone else's skull unless something seriously rowdy is going on. Another possibility is that these were the remains of enemies, and the staked skulls were brought back by warriors as trophies. Now this explanation is possible, but no records have ever shown that the Predator lived in Sweden, and I think the Predator is more of a skull hunting guy than any humans. Anyway, we may never know the truth behind this one, and I'm gonna be honest, that might be for everybody's best. I want to sleep tonight. And number 1, the HMS Franklin. Have you ever dreamed perhaps of sailing the world, going all master and commander, discovering new lands with your comrades in arms under the mizzenmast? I wanted to be a naval explorer for years, unconcerned of the dangers of the sea. Well, it turns out that the life aquatic is significantly more dangerous than the movies make it out to be, and oftentimes you never make it home. In 1845, Sir John Franklin led 2 great ships, the HMS Erebus and the unfortunately named HMS Terror, on a voyage to chart the Arctic. Franklin was a seasoned sailor, and he'd already been around the Arctic 2 times already, and thought he knew his way around an iceberg. Well, it's the Arctic, and things happen. Can't plan for it. That departure in 1845 would be the last time anyone ever saw any of those 2 ships for the better part of 170 years. The Erebus and the Terror both became trapped in ice, and an unreasonably cold summer meant that they were trapped there much longer than anyone could have expected. In a desperate attempt to flee the situation, the crews of both ships evacuated and made a dreadful journey some 1,000 miles to the nearest trading port on the Hudson Bay. Now, you don't need to be a historian. You tell me how you think this turned out. Well, you can probably guess, since they're listed as number 1 on a video about scary archaeological finds, the walk home didn't go super great. The bodies were eventually discovered, preserved in terrifying detail. Captain America, they ain't. Now the bodies were buried in permafrost, meaning they were preserved kind of like a mummy, but colder and way scarier. They look like latex Halloween masks, but they're real people. And where things get truly terrifying was wound patterns on bones nearby to the bodies that suggested when the crew got hungry, they started looking inwards for food, for long pork. If you are what you eat, then these people are humans. If the implication is not coming across just yet, I don't know if I can be any more subtle about it. Bones had been found cracked, the marrow empty, and knife marks on the bones suggested cuts like a butcher would have. The crew had run out of supplies and began eating their own, desperate to make it back, but never did. The lesson to be learned here? You can never pack enough trail mix. Always bring a second bag of that stuff. Bring some jerky before you have to start treating the cabin boys as food.
Number 5, the Red Forest. In the years since the disaster, the flora and fauna of the area has begun to thrive, taking over much of the area. However, some of this plant life is unlike any you've ever seen due to the massive amounts of radiation in the area. In the time directly after the accident, a woodland in the area filled with normally green pine trees turned bright red and died, being dubbed the Blood Red Forest. What is even more unusual about these trees is that even 20 years after the disaster, these dead trees have not decayed. Most dead trees will rot to dust within a decade, but these red trees have somehow avoided this fate. Scientists gathered bags of red leaves to run tests on their rate of decomposition, finding that they were less decomposed by 30% than regular leaves, and remained intact and dry even after a whole year. This indicates that the ecosystem will have trouble replenishing itself with nutrients, and worst still, that the dry leaves could result in a fire. If that were to happen, it would risk radioactive containments being spread through the air outside of the exclusion zone and into nearby areas it could damage. Other strange ways that the radiation affected the plants in the time after the disaster was some being seen growing or shrinking to unusual sizes, or in some cases, even glowing in the dark. What other ways has the radiation from the Chernobyl disaster affected the plant life of the area that we simply can't see? Is there a way to get one of those red forest trees for my home in time for Christmas, or should I stick to the classic green? Number 4. These creepy dolls. What would a spooky list be without an entry about a creepy doll? There's something about them that puts people on edge, despite being intended as objects of joy and comfort for children. When the city of Pripyat was evacuated the day after the disaster, 49,000 people had to leave their homes with little notice, having very little time to pack their belongings, and most things simply being left behind. They were under the impression that they would be returning home after a short amount of time, so many objects remain where they were abandoned to this day, including the toys of the children of Pripyat. In the years since the disaster, these dolls have begun to radiate and rot, taking on a haunting and disturbing look. Many are left in positions of play, while others have been posed in the years since by urban explorers into positions of a more sinister nature. When wandering through the abandoned town, though, it may be comforting to know that you are not alone, as you are being watched by thousands of dead, glassy doll eyes as you make your way through the empty streets. Number 3. The elephant's foot. At the epicenter of the Chernobyl disaster is a strange mass which has been nicknamed the elephant's foot. The Chernobyl incident was caused when there was a power surge during a routine test that went wrong, resulting in the uranium rods overheating in their cooling water. This caused them to give off a massive amount of steam and pressure, which built up until there were 2 massive explosions. This caused radioactive material to spurt into the atmosphere and for coolant to stop flowing into the reactor. This built up enough thermal energy to melt the fuel rods, causing a molten lava-like material to form, which gives off deadly levels of ionizing radiation. This material then melted through the steel beams and concrete below the reactor, and fell into the basement, where it pooled and eventually cooled, causing this combination of uranium, graphite, concrete, and sand to form together into the elephant's foot. This foot's radiation levels were measured shortly after the disaster, and were found to be giving off 10,000 Roentgens of ionizing radiation per hour, which would be the equivalent level of millions of chest x-rays at once, which would obviously be extremely fatal. In the years since, the radiation level has decreased significantly, but it still has enough radiation to emit heat and dangerous amount of radiation. When looking at photos of the elephant's foot, it can be hard to believe the amount of pain and suffering the seemingly boring rock in the middle of a basement can cause. But then, the deadliest things often appear harmless at first.
In second place, we have the blue-ringed octopus. Now, just a little background. An octopus is a soft-bodied, 8-limbed mollusk of the Octopoda order that consists of around 300 different species. Like other cephalopods, an octopus is bilaterally symmetric, with 2 eyes and a beaked mouth at the center point of the 8 limbs. The soft body can radically alter its shape, enabling octopuses to squeeze through small gaps. The siphon is used both for respiration and for locomotion by expelling a jet of water. Octopuses have a complex nervous system and excellent sight, and are among the most intelligent and behaviorally diverse of all invertebrates. Octopuses inhabit various regions of the ocean, including coral reefs, pelagic waters, and the seabed. Some live in the intertidal zone and others at abyssal depths. All octopuses are venomous, but only the blue-ringed octopuses are known to be deadly to humans, ergo why they're my focus today. This specific species can be found in tide pools and coral reefs in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, from Japan to Australia, and can be identified by their yellowish skin and characteristic blue and black rings that change color dramatically when threatened. They eat small crustaceans, including crabs, hermit crabs, shrimp, and other small sea animals. Despite their small size that ranges from 5 to 8 inches in circumference, they are very very dangerous to humans if provoked when handled because their venom contains a powerful neurotoxin tetrodotoxin, which can cause loss of all sensations and paralysis of voluntary muscles, including the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, ergo stopping breathing. The full list of possible side effects from the venom include nausea, heart failure, severe and total paralysis, blindness, and can lead to death within minutes. The blue-ringed octopus carries enough venom to kill 26 adult humans within minutes. I'm just going to repeat that to be clear, 26 adult humans within minutes. Their bites are tiny and often painless, with many victims not realizing they have been envenomated until respiratory depression and paralysis begins. Oh, and by the way, there is no such thing as blue-ringed octopus antivenom available. And finally, in first place we have the stonefish. Now, you might be asking, after the deadly octopus and a literal pit in the ocean, how can we get scarier? Welcome to where I almost jumped out of my chair and onto the floor. Stonefish are a family of fish called Sinister. They are famous for being the most venomous fish in the world, with a sting that causes excruciating pain and, you guessed it, humans. Their venom is lethal to other marine animals and humans, causing intense pain, breathing problems, damage to the heart, fits, and paralysis. Now, thankfully, unlike the blue-ringed octopus, there is an antivenom, but if it's not delivered quickly, the effects can be fatal. We know of 5 different species that exist. The midget stonefish, or the Orcinacea alula, estuarine stonefish, or Sinacea orida, the Red Sea stonefish, or Sinacea nana, the Sinacea platarincha, and simply the stonefish, or Sinacea verrucos. Look, I tried my best. They hail from the coastal regions of the Indo-Pacific Ocean, so northern Australia, India, the Philippines, and others. Their name comes from their ability to blend in with rocky seafloors and amongst coral, which is what makes them easily stepped on by people and is a good chunk of the danger. They have 13 spines along their backs, which is what delivers the toxin, and at the base of each spine is a venom sac, which is activated under pressure. So, you know, when somebody accidentally steps on them. Now, if that's not terrifying enough for you, because we do have a reputation to uphold here, scientists at the University of Kansas have discovered that stonefish also have a hidden switchblade in their face that they can flick out whenever they feel like they're in danger. They call this bony, blade-like protrusion a lacrimal saber, and it's located on a bone under the fish's eyes. The saber is housed inside the fish's head, and they use their cheek muscles to deploy it. One good thing at least is that it's not venomous like their spines.